lions and lionesses. Today, I'm going to share with you actionable information. Things that I learned over the last 7 days, or things that reminded me of something that I believe will benefit you personally. And so, if you recall, there are 3 pillars of power. And these 3 pillars are absolutely essential. You need all 3 in order to master your body. And the first one is physical training. And now I build your programs for you. So I build 3 types of physical training into every program because everybody needs them. And one is resistance training or strength training. That we do 3 times a week. Then on the other days, we do cardiovascular conditioning. Sometimes we're doing intervals that are more intense. Sometimes we're doing steady state. We're keeping the same intensity throughout. And then at the beginning and end of every training session, we prepare your body and we correct imbalances and create alignment. And this is called structural balance and mobility. And those are the 3 types of physical training. That's the first pillar of power. The second one is effective eating. Not some diet that you can only do for a week or a day or whatever. If you can't sustain it, it's not effective. We got to get that in our minds. There are no shortcuts. And so it's an effective eating plan that isn't so restrictive that you're consumed, every thought is consumed with food and being hungry. No, an effective eating plan is a nutrient-dense eating plan. It's where you're eating foods most of the time close to their natural source. And it makes you feel full and your body's getting the nutrition that it needs to be healthy, vital, strong, and to think clearly and stay focused. So that's nutrition, effective eating. We've got physical training, effective eating, and the third one is what most people never talk about, even though it's the only thing that allows you to carry your plan through. It is mental conditioning. If you don't use it, you lose it. And most people just aren't taught to think. And so we think by demand because the world is placing demands upon ourselves. But what happens when you take time, you dedicate time, and you prioritize training your mind and body? So you'll notice when I make your programs, I design these programs, and in the descriptions, I'll say smile while you're doing burpees, for instance. Now, burpees are one of the most functional exercises ever. I remember growing up, there was always this commercial, you've probably seen it, an old lady fell down and she goes, I've fallen, I can't get up, because she didn't have the strength to get up. And I don't want that for anybody. And it was funny when you hear it when you're a kid, but as you live life and you have family members, and as we edge up there, we start to think that could be someone I really love and care about, right? It's no longer that funny. But it's good to laugh at everything because the cool thing with this is it can all be avoided by what you do today. But most people wait till it's too late. And there is a point of no return. And that's what happened to my own mom. She kept putting it off, do a little bit here, then stop. She was all in or all out. And then her health deteriorated over many years to the point she could no longer, take care of herself. And then the medical system kept her alive, but she wanted to die. And then she passed. But and I really believe that happened so that I can make sure that doesn't occur to other people because it's a choice. It's not like you just age. We age because of the way we live. And I'm not saying you're gonna live for eternity. Maybe you will, I don't know. But what I'm saying is it's the little things you do each day, done over and over again, that lead to massive rewards, massive results over time. But it's not sexy. It's not, look at me, look how great this is. It's like, no, it's what you do when no one's looking that really matters. It's waking up and not feeling your best and don't feel like doing it because your body always seeks comfort. It doesn't want to be challenged, but that's the very thing that robs us of energy and vitality and ultimately life. We must take on the mindset of an athlete, a lifelong athlete, because if you don't use it, you lose it. Challenge creates change. You stimulate the body, but you don't annihilate it. Like right now when I'm recording this, I have a warehouse called the Lion's Den, and next door is another bay, it's like a gym, and it's not mine, it's just some other people, and they're over there dropping weights right now, and I love it because it reminds me, even though it's loud and you might hear it, I love it that people are taking the time, and it's a Sunday that I'm recording this, which is traditionally a day where people don't do anything, yet they're over there training their asses off. And these are, you know who they are? They're firefighters. And like, that makes me super happy, because if we need them, they'll be good. And so back to the 3 pillars of power: physical training, effective eating, mental conditioning. So today I'm going to share a little bit of all 3. And so the first one is I'm going to talk about anti-inflammatory foods. Now, there are foods that are nutrient dense, that contain certain nutrients that lower inflammation. But the problem is people don't understand what inflammation is, because inflammation is a good thing. Chronic systemic inflammation is not a good thing. It's often believed to be the cause, well, it's not often believed, it is the cause of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and other imbalances of such. And so we have to understand that there's good inflammation, like say you fall down and you land on your knee and it swells up and it gets red and there's fluid in it. That's the body sending resources to repair the damage. That's important. And so that's not bad. So chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, that's what we want to overcome. And so these foods will assist with that. And really, it's not the foods from Mother Nature. I call it Mother Nature's kitchen. There's certain foods that just have tons of nutrients in it. So when you have a food that's closest to this natural source, what does that do? Well, it hasn't been processed in a way where most of those nutrients get destroyed. So if you have, let's look at flour, right? Like you had grains, and the grains get demonized, every food gets demonized, so erase everything you think, because every food can keep you alive. So just get that out of your mind. But some foods are more nutrient dense than others. And so grains, for instance, have tons of nutrition in them. But when you start to pulverize them and bleach them and do all these things, it strips them of that, and now you have empty calories. It's like Coca-Cola, right? Or Pepsi. I'm not going to pick on the brand, but it's just sugar water, right? There's no nutrients in it. And it makes you want to drink more. It has like almost like an addictive quality. And there's some parts of the world where it's worshipped like a god. If there's a place in Mexico, if you look this up, it will blow your mind. In church, they offer Coca-Cola to whoever they're praying to. I don't quite understand it, but there are Coca-Cola logos everywhere. And it will change your perspective about neuromarketing, how to influence people. It's really, really worth looking into it. But back to inflammation. Today we're going to talk about what foods you can eat today, tomorrow, for all of eternity that will assist your health. The first one is fatty fish. So I like to think of fatty fish as salmon, sardines, and supplements, because those are the ones that there's other ones, but those are the ones that really move the needle. So omega-3 fatty acids inhibit inflammatory cytokines. So they are Mother Nature's anti-inflammatory, also a cognitive enhancer. There's studies showing that it helps reverse biological aging. So that's one. So omega-3 fatty acids, and if you're taking supplements, the effective dose is between 2 and 4 grams. Most people are at 2 or 3 grams, but if someone's a larger person, like some of the athletes I work with, they take 4, sometimes 6 grams, depending on what's going on in their training and if they're injured and so forth. But there's multiple randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses. And meta-analyses, if you don't know, is when you look at all the evidence as a whole rather than just looking at one study. But it shows that omega-3 fatty acids reduce markers of C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, which are how in lab tests, we look at systemic inflammation, okay? The next one is leafy greens. What are leafy greens? Well, it kind of says just in the word, but spinach, kale, collard greens, also like sprouts of all sorts are very beneficial here, and they're high in polyphenols, carotenoids, and fiber. But the studies show that the compounds, and there's other ones in it too, like lutein, and there's one, it's hard to pronounce, I think it's like ampherol or something like that. But these suppress inflammatory pathways. But again, just eating those leafy greens is very beneficial. So we got these fatty fish, or you could take it in a supplement form. We have these leafy greens. Then we have berries of all types. These are strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. What else are there? Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries. Yeah, those are the ones. And so those are packed with nutrients that are really good for your eyeballs, by the way, but they're also for your brain, anthocyanins and flavonoids. Now, there are tons of studies showing that they're beneficial for all this stuff, but why are they beneficial? Well, they reduce oxidative stress and lower inflammation. That's really what they're doing. Now, a food that I think everyone should take on a regular basis, but measure it because you can get too many calories from it too, is a really good extra virgin olive oil. There is so much research on this. It contains something called oleocanthal, which the best way to describe it acts like natural ibuprofen. That's the way it acts. But ibuprofen can actually cause stomach bleeding, and it can have other effects. But getting away from that, it's shown to lower C-reactive protein. So, even in people with metabolic syndrome, so if you have metabolic syndrome, you have chronic inflammation. But this would be a really good thing to take. But the problem is there was a study done where, I think it was University of California, Davis, if I recall, where they went into Trader Joe's and all these different stores, and they just took olive oil off the shelf and they tested for purity. What they found, over 60% of the olive oils were not pure olive oil, which is disturbing. They were diluting and watering it down for a greater profit with less expensive oils. So here's what you want to look at when you buy extra virgin olive oil. You want to make sure it's organic. You want to make sure it's one source, single source, because what a lot of these farms do is they buy the ones that fell on the ground, the olives that fell on the ground that aren't as high quality, and so they're picking up all the extras from other farms and making an inferior product. And so they've already started to degrade. That's the reason behind that. And so single source, organic, early harvest. And you want to make sure, if you can, to buy one that, what's the best way to say this? But you want to buy one that definitely has all that language in it, but make sure it has a certificate of authenticity or a lab essay saying the polyphenol count. And there's ones that do it. It costs more, but it's worth it. There's a ton of them now. Since that study came out, a lot of the really good olive oil suppliers are doing these things. So keep that in mind. But I think everyone should have extra virgin olive oil or eat whole olives, either one or both. The next one is turmeric. Now, you may know the active component called curcumin. Curcumin modulates inflammation at the genetic level. And so I won't go through all the big names and stuff, but there's hundreds of studies to support its effectiveness, especially when it's combined with piperine. Piperine is black pepper. It makes it more effective at its job. So turmeric or curcumin, you can take this as a supplement or you could add it to your foods. It's really good with rice. The next one are certain nuts, but the nuts you really want to, like walnuts, have extraordinary nutrient values, and so do almonds. And so what do they have? Well, they're healthy fats for one thing, right? But vitamin E and all these polyphenols. Now, they've been associated with lowering C-reactive protein and TNF alpha levels. But the problem with nuts and olive oil is that in a small amount, there are a lot of calories because they're mainly fats. So if you don't know, for every gram of protein or carbohydrate you have, there's 4 calories. There's 4 units of energy. That's what calories are. And for every gram of fat, there's 9 calories. Now that doesn't make one good or one bad. It just is. It's just like, hey, if you have a tablespoon of olive oil, it's 120 calories, 14 grams of fat. All 14 grams come from fat. It's a pure fat. So oils, nuts, and seeds are fats, which means they're gonna be higher in calories. And so I had a client, he owned a cigar company. He's really cool. I love this guy. And he put me in an ad in Cigar Aficionado, which is so silly. I'm like, you're gonna go out of business, bud. But he was having trouble. He's like a disciplined guy, and he was having trouble. He was like gaining weight still. I'm like, what are you doing? And I was like, maybe it's the cigars. I don't know. And this is a long time ago. And what we found was he had a bowl of almonds on his desk, and he would just take a handful, many times a day. So he was having about 1,200 extra calories, 1,200 calories more than he thought he was. And so he was slowly gaining weight because he was just eating too much. So even if you have healthy foods, you tend to not overeat them, but nuts, seeds, and oils are really easy to overeat. So I just want to give you that caveat. Now, the last food I want to share with you is green tea. Green tea is high in something called EGCG. I'm not going to pronounce it because there's no use for it. I'll just sound really smart and you'll be confused probably because that's the way I felt before I learned this. But it's a strong anti-inflammatory. Now, there's a lot of evidence on this that it reduces inflammatory markers. I won't go into the details. It also supports detoxification. Like every food that's close to its natural source, we can talk about how great it is because it contains nutrients. So keep in mind, the big principle is this: foods closest to their natural source are packed with nutrients. The more nutrients a food has, the greater the benefit, and the less likely you'll overeat on it. And so keep that in mind. Those are the foods that are anti-inflammatory in nature. Now, I want to talk about physical training. There is a huge mistake I see people make all the time, and it's the myth of spot reduction. I remember we would have, at the first gym I worked at back in the day, they would have these classes like, what was it called, buns and abs or something like that. And for an hour, they just worked their butts and their abs. And I never saw anyone improve from it. Why? Because there are 3 pillars of power. Your nutrition matters. It's really, really important. You can work out all day long and not make any progress and probably injure yourself because your body can't recover from it. And so I'll give you an example. Like, cardio does not burn fat. It burns calories, but that doesn't mean you're burning stored fat. Your nutrition will dictate that. That's called the first law of thermodynamics. So this is a law in physics. That states energy, calories, cannot be created or destroyed. They only change shape or form. So if you eat too much food, it's going to be stored as fat. But if you're doing resistance training in a challenging way consistently, some of that extra food will convert into muscle, which is awesome. So it mitigates damage. But anyone can overeat, and regardless of the food. The only foods that that doesn't happen, and we don't understand the mechanism yet, is protein foods. Protein burns a lot of calories in the act of digesting it. So I'll give you an example. This is called the thermic effect of food, or specific dynamic action of food. Leave it to scientists to make everything super confusing. But this is what it means. If you eat food, when you eat food, your body has to do some work. It needs to use some energy to process it, to break it down, to absorb it, and utilize it, right? That makes sense. And so we have 3 macronutrients: carbs, proteins, and fats. Fats are super easy to break down. Like, think of a big ball of Play-Doh. That's fat. Then as it goes in the body, it's broken down into 2 smaller balls, then 4, then 8, and to the point where they're small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream through the small intestine at the duodenum. And then it can carry out its function. So it doesn't require a lot of energy. For every 100 calories worth of fat you take in, you only burn about 3 calories to break it down and digest it. Same thing with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, for every 100 calories, you burn a little bit more, but this is sugars I'm talking about. So like orange juice or any type of juice, because there's no energy to be done, right? So the more a food has to be broken down, the more energy you use, the more calories you burn digesting and processing. Now, when you eat like starches, carbs, like potatoes and things like rice, those types of foods, or oatmeal, they're harder to break down. And so what happens is, for every 100 calories, you're burning maybe 10 calories just to break it down. Pretty cool, right? So now you're burning far more than just fat. That doesn't mean fat's bad and carbs are good. It is what it is. Now, protein is the X factor here. For every 100 calories, like, protein is more difficult to break down because it carries out really important functions. Like, if you snap your fingers, about 23 million cells break down and they need to be replaced. That process of rebuilding those cells is called protein synthesis. So everybody needs protein. Really important for anti-aging. Very important for everything that has to do with your health. And so protein is imperative, but it's challenging to break down and to utilize because it can do so many things. It's literally rebuilding your body. And so for every 100 calories of protein, chicken breast, of eggs, of beef, of bison, of salmon, all these things, right? For every 100 calories of protein, you burn 20 to 30 calories in the act of digesting, absorbing, and assimilating it. And so you got to take that into account when you're eating foods. So just keep that in mind. I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but I got sidetracked there because I wanted to share that. But there's these little things that add up. It's not going to change your life, but it does matter. So the myth of spot reduction is this: if I just do ab exercises all day long, I will burn off the fat in that area, and then it will be the way I want it to be. I'm going to give you a real story. This man owned gas stations, and he was an Indian man, and I will give you a perfect example of it. We were friends, so I can talk about him this way. And so this was when I first started as a trainer, a long time ago. And so I wanted to help everybody. And I was a little annoying about it now that I look back on it, because I was like always there, like, hey, let's do it, let's go. But now I only help people if they ask for help. And so you can't help everybody. But this guy would ask me. And so he was always on the treadmill and doing ab exercises. And it looked like he swallowed an entire watermelon and it went only to his stomach. He had thin legs, thin arms, everything was thin, except he looked like he was pregnant, and he didn't like it, and I can't blame him. And so he's an Indian fellow. He had a great accent, like the thickest accent I've ever heard. And I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at times, so there's not a whole lot of Indian people there. So I wasn't used to the accent, and plus I was young. And so this is before I ever went to India too. And so he was the best though. I love this guy. And I was like, hey, what do you eat? And he goes, every morning I'd eat shortbread. I'm like, what? And so we went back and forth, and he was talking about cookies. That's what he was eating with tea, with sugar in it, right? So I'm like, okay, there's not that many calories in it, but like, how many you eat? And it was like 6, I remember. Some days more. And then he would snack on these too that he didn't tell me about. I found out later. And then he owned gas stations that had what are called blimpie subs. And he goes, and for lunch every day, I will have a chicken blimpie sub. That's how he said it. And then he would have the 6-inch, and then he'd put the other half in his car all day long. It had mayonnaise on it, by the way. And then he would eat the other half for dinner. And so wasn't eating that bad, but it was not very good either, right? Obviously it wasn't correct because he wasn't making progress, but he was convinced. He would not believe me that doing ab exercises would not burn off his belly fat. He just would not believe me. And so it's kind of sad because he never really did anything, but he didn't really make progress. And so he wasn't even a vegetarian either, so it's much easier if you're not a vegetarian to get in shape because you have more food choices. But that's the big myth. And the world has perpetuated this lie that if you just work an area of your body, it will burn off the fat. You must be in a calorie deficit. That's why I brought up the first law of thermodynamics. So if you eat too much, we know that those calories just don't disappear. That energy doesn't disappear. It's stored as fat in most people, right? Now, if you eat less than your body burns, there's a calorie deficit. So say you're burning off 2,000 calories a day and you ingest 1,500 calories a day. Now the body needs those 500 calories somewhere, and so it's gonna go into stored fat, convert that into sugar, into glucose, and then that's how you burn fat. That's what it is. And so what most people do is they start a diet and they eat far too little food. And now they're saying, well, if 1,500 calories gets me to burn fat, I want the results faster. So I'm gonna fast and I'm gonna eat even less. And then what happens is they get really hungry. And what happens? Do they just get off track for a little bit, or do they go off the rails? Usually people go off the rails. But here's the thing. You gotta do resistance training, because if you're in a calorie deficit, some of that, and you're not doing resistance training, the body will also break down muscle. And muscle is the physical location of the body where you burn fat. It's also where you make ATP, energy. So you want to keep muscle. Muscle is so important. So everyone's goal, who is a human anyway, should be to protect and add lean muscle mass, build strength and endurance, while losing excess fat that can cause chronic inflammation. When we have too much fat on our bodies, it damages the mitochondria and we get chronic low-grade systemic inflammation. That's why your body composition is so important. So how do you know, what's a simple way of getting there? Well, take a measurement over your belly button, your navel, and over your hips. Put your feet together, flex your muscles, that means tighten them, make them harden your muscles, and then take a tape measure right over the largest part of your hips and look at that number. Then go over your navel in that same position, tighten your stomach like someone's gonna punch you and you're bracing yourself. That way it standardizes it. That way if you have inflammation in your gut or anything, that it takes that out because the muscles will contract to act like as a girdle, it'll hold into a certain position. And then you're just measuring what it is. And then if your stomach is bigger than your hips, your goal is to change that. Get your stomach to be the same as your hips or less. And that is a really useful indicator of, is your body composition good? So there's a study on that where they looked at different factors, but one of the factors was your hip to waist ratio. And if you have what I just mentioned, then these people live 12 to 14 years longer. So really, really important. But the point I want to push into your subconscious mind and plant that seed in there is more is not better. More is often destructive. It often leads to little tweaks, aches, pains, injuries. But just doing stuff, doing random shit does not work. I've never seen anyone transform their body. We have over 4,000 success stories here. I've never seen one transform their body without having structure, without having a plan, and without being consistent. And no one has ever done it with just exercise that I've ever met in my entire life. And I've been doing this for over 3 decades. And so just keep in mind, you gotta follow the plan if you want physical mastery. You gotta have a structure and consistency. And you can't keep looking for shortcuts. Like biohacking was cool at first because it was just like, hey, let's measure and base things off of objective measures rather than how we feel. I love that. But it's become this whole gimmicky thing with social media, and people just say stuff on podcasts and make these wild claims, but they're not true. So people will talk about all kinds of stuff, like red light therapy does this. Now, red light therapy is helpful compared to intelligent exercise. And it's like getting punched by, exercise is like training is like getting punched by Mike Tyson in his prime, or in red light therapy, it'd be like getting slapped by a baby. Like there's a huge difference in effects. So the things that really move the needle are those 3 pillars, and then add recovery, sleep to that. And then that is 90% of everything. And then this other stuff is fun. I love it. I have all these devices and stuff, but I test everything, I experiment with everything so that I can share with you guys. When something really works, I will tell you. But like if you want to invest in anything with biohacking, it would be a sauna, honestly. A sauna there's tons of research behind it, and it boosts immunity. I could talk about it all day. Lowers your risk of heart attack, stroke, also neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia. This lowers your risk by, if you do it 4 to 7 times a week for 20 minutes at work your way up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit, that will reduce your risk by about 50%, sometimes even more. But it's more effective to do 20 minutes 4 to 7 times a week than do an hour 3 times a week. And that's what the research shows. So the first thing we talked about was the difference between chronic inflammation and the helpful inflammation. Like if you take anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen or aspirin or Tylenol after you train, it inhibits inflammation. That is the healing process. It will mitigate your results. It will reverse your results in some cases. And so you do not want to take anti-inflammatories. You do not want to do anything anti-inflammatory after you train. So you don't want to do a cold bath after that. Keep that in mind. So don't interfere with short-term acute healing inflammation. Let it ride out. But chronic inflammation, you want to heal the body, because what chronic inflammation is debt. It's the body's breaking down and needs to be repaired. But over time, the body's breaking down faster than it can repair itself, and now you have this form of physical debt. or accelerated aging. So we gotta give the body the raw materials it needs, the foods, the nutrients. We gotta give it the rest too, but we also need to stimulate it through intelligent, challenging, and consistent training. Make sense? Okay, so that's the chronic inflammation thing. And then we talked about the myth of spot reduction. If you wanna burn fat off a part of your body, just training the muscles underneath the fat will not burn it off. It is looking at those 3 pillars of power. You gotta have the nutrition and the training and the mindset to carry through that plan consistently, right? Now, the last thing I wanna talk about is mental conditioning and an exercise you can do today that I highly recommend. I first learned this as an athlete and as a fighter, and then I started the athletes I worked with, especially the fighters. I've trained 5 heavyweight boxing champions of the world, and it was really cool. I love training fighters because I love being in their corner. It's like such an experience because you're with them all fight camp, and you see everything they go through. You see how much they have trained and suffered, what they've overcome. Like, you understand what's going on in their personal life on top of it, and then you walk out in this pivotal moment where this future is decided. His career, his ability to feed his family is decided in this moment. All this work comes in. He steps in the ring or the cage, and it's the amount of pressure you feel when you step into a ring or a cage, and just the fear. Like, no matter who you are and how much you prepared, you have a level of fear. And so it's mostly mental, because you cannot have an off night. That one night, that short period of time, you cannot have an off night, or you will be put to sleep. And your life will not have the same opportunities when you wake up from it. It's a lot. And so I really respect everyone who's ever, my dad was a fighter and I was a fighter, obviously, but I really respect anyone that ever gets in there, because it is scary. And you have to override your survival mind, because it just doesn't smart. It's not smart to go in there and fight somebody, everything in your psyche is telling you not to do it. And you have to override that. And that's, you got to push the lamb to the side and step forward with a greater story and a higher purpose as that lion or lioness. And that's like a microcosm. That's just an example of what we do every day in real life. And so what we found was, I was like, hey, I need a way to make sure my guys are at their best. So how do we summon the lion? How do we do this? And that's where this comes from. So you've heard of a vision board. And a lot of people, if you're an athlete, knows like, hey, I want to be the champ. I want to win the Super Bowl. I want to be the MVP. I want to have these statistics. Like, in baseball, I want to have my batting average at this. I want to have this many stolen bases, this many home runs. Like, very clear indicators. That's what's cool with sports. You have very objective goals, and there's nowhere, it just is. It's like with your body. Your body, if you improve, it's because you did certain things. It's a law of cause and effect. And so back to this exercise, the vision board is awesome, right? It's cool. Everyone should do that. Everyone should have a clear, compelling vision of the future, a higher purpose for it, and know how they need to show up each day to carry that plan through. But the victory board is essential, because we don't always feel like doing shit. Life is tough sometimes. It's also beautiful sometimes, but it's all about what you're focused upon. So we have all lived a portion of our lives, and we've had moments, magical moments, powerful moments, moments of victory, of triumph, where you felt unstoppable, where you felt heartfelt gratitude, where you did something that you didn't even know was possible. And there was this epiphany, this expansion of how you see yourself and who you are and what's possible in your life. And we can borrow from the past. That never goes away. And so if there was a moment where you felt triumphant, think about that right now. Remember that time. What were you wearing? Do you remember what you were wearing? Were you wearing jewelry of any sort, like a ring or a necklace? Did you have shoes on? Socks? No socks? Step into that moment now and think about this. And what you want to do is you want to rewrite this story so that you can connect. And what you want to write about is the 5 senses. What did you smell in that moment? Did you have cologne or perfume on, or were you sweating? Did you stink a little in a good way, from exercising? From not sleeping or something, not bathing, whatever it is. But it doesn't matter. There's no wrong here. It just is. What we want to do is tap into that time. And then we're going to extract that feeling state, that state of being, that powerful state of being. And so when you do that, just take note of these things and decide, like, I'm going to do it for a moment when I felt triumphant. I'm going to do it for a moment when I felt really loved and appreciated. I'm going to do it for a moment where I felt really respected and honored. I'm going to do it for a moment where I felt really compassionate and understanding and caring. And just start with those ones. Then have one for radiant health and energy. When did I feel really healthy and energized? Now, you may come to the conclusion that you never felt certain states. That's fine. Then what you do is now you become the architect. How can I design an experience to evoke these powerful states? And that's what I did with one of my fighters. This was a very, very talented young man. And I won't say his name because I didn't ask him to do this. But when he fought, he just didn't show up. Like, I would see him in training, and I was like, holy shit, and everyone that knew anything about fighting was like, this kid could be a champion. And so I decided to put him in the state he felt like when he was training, and then break the pattern, and then have him overcome it. And we did this in a very scary way. So we ran hill sprints with logs on our backs, and then you'd carry it in front of you, which is even harder. But I just do it. It took him to a state, and I was doing it with him, but I did this all the time, so it wasn't like hard for me. But he never did this before. So, and then I had him wear a weighted vest too. I didn't wear one because I was talking. I needed to be able to yell at him and get into his head. And so we're doing these things, and I'm antagonizing him the entire time. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to put him in that state. I want him to feel defeated. And then I'm going to bring him back to who he is. And I've already done that many times. So this was like a pivotal moment. There was work before this, but I was like, I want him to be challenged and to unleash the beast in that moment. Because what was happening, he would get to a certain level of fatigue because of his fear. Because when you're in fear-based states, you use more energy than you create. And so if you're in fear, you fatigue very quickly. And I learned that from being a fighter and that happening to me. and so this young man, when we were doing this, I was getting him to that point, and I would say, remember your last fight? Remember this, remember that? And I was pulling out all those defeats and failures, and I was wrapping up in one package. And then I'd push him while he was running, and one time he dropped the log, and he just was like, oh, fuck, and he put his hands on his knees. And I gave him some clear feedback on how weak he was. And this was hard because I really liked him. But I was like, I'm doing it for him. We're gonna make this never happen again. Because I kept thinking, for me to fall through on this, like, I saw what happened to him fighting. And when you have a fighter who's your friend, like, I remember being a little kid watching my dad fight. It was like excruciating because you can't do anything. You can't help. It's the worst. And then you think about everything they've been through for the training, and then they're not winning, and they're getting physically harmed, And so it's really hard. And I thought about that. I'm like, I'm going to make sure he never goes through that again. Even if this sucks for me, I'm going to do this for a higher purpose. And we did it again and again. This kid is tough, but he didn't recognize that. And whenever there was a time where he just couldn't do it anymore, and I said, again, and he picked up the log, and so I picked it up and I threw it to him, and he caught it and fell down onto one knee. And I said, get up. And that's what we always yell when someone gets knocked down in a fight. They just get up. The whole corner is yelling it. People that are rooting for his family, they're all yelling these words. This was a key phrase that we chose, right? And he was like, he went put his other knee down, and I got right in his face, and I grabbed by his shirt, and I lifted him up. I felt so strong. I'll never forget how strong I felt. Because it was like out of love. Like I just wanted it for him so bad. And he didn't know what I was doing, right? He's a young kid. I don't think anyone knew what I was doing at this point because it was so crazy. And it was like on a power line up a big hillside. There's no one around. Might have been someone fishing or something by the dam, but no one saw this guy. I couldn't do this in public because they would call the cops, I think. And I was like, get up. I was like, let this part of you die. This isn't you. This is something you learned, and it no longer serves you. I was like, get up and let that part of you die. And then I saw his eye shift. Like, the eyes are the gateway to the soul. And I remember him looking at me, and I was like, ooh, this is not good for me. And I put my hand on his heart and one on the back of his neck, and I said, that's the guy I know. I was like, again. And he picked up that log, and he started fucking running, sprints up this. This is over an hour of doing this. This is insane. Like, I never did that long. This guy was like tapped into something that is beyond human, because nothing in the science should allow him to do this. He should be exhausted. There shouldn't be any more fuel left. He tapped into something else. And then we kept doing it, and we gave it a name. And for him, I won't say what it is because it's personal for him, but it was a phrase that we used again and again and again, and it became part of his identity. It was like this gear, just like, Bruce Wayne is Batman, right? And so, and like Clark Kent, Superman, whatever it is, but every superhero story has this alter ego. And so what we did, so that he wasn't, become a violent person in public, was that was a thing that he called forth and he's in complete command of. So when we trained after this, it was like, okay, this is how we prepare. This is how you activate this part of you. And we did it again and again and again. And that's what I invite you to do. Just go into your victory bank. Find those times where you felt triumphant. Name that part. Give it a name or a phrase. Like unleash the lion, summon the lion. That's what I use. And so it's this phrase, and then just do something unique. Maybe clap 3 times. Or like, I'll give you some examples, other people, other clients. And one of my clients does, it's so funny, he does clapping push-up. He gets on the ground, does one push-up and claps and pops up at the same time. It's really cool. And but he does this in meetings and stuff in public, but it shifts his state. And he's like, oh, I'm getting a little lammy, and he'll just do it, pop up and go right in. And I'm like, full suit, everything. And but it becomes this fun game, and you have this thing where it's like, oh, I'm not having a good day, I'm not feeling bad. And like, no, I create these states, and this is how you do it. So here are the steps. Go back in time and pull out those moments. Choose those magical moments where you felt triumphant, victorious, whatever state you want to create. And then give it a name and give it a way of evoking it. Maybe it's snapping your fingers. Maybe it's clapping. It could be anything, but make each one slightly different. Like on each of my fingers, I've trained these into me. So I can be super calm and peaceful. Like I went in deep meditative states and did this certain thing. Touched these 2 fingers together, and then it changed my breath instantly. So if I'm training and I'm like super out of breath, or I feel super stressed about something, I just do that and it brings me right back to center. But I also have ones where if I need to go beast mode, like, here we go, let's go. And so like I instantly increase my strength when I do that. It's really cool. It's hard to understand until you do it. So the first time you do it, just be curious. And if it's not working right away, you gotta feed it more, because what we feed grows. So do more reps, do it with more emotion. That's the key. Or get clear on what it is. Really get into those 5 senses of the experience that you're borrowing from. Or be the architect and design an experience to create that. Name it, give it a move, an activator, a trigger, and then every time you train, you use that. You feed it. Because if you do this once and then you don't practice it, you don't keep feeding it, it diminishes in power. So the more you do it, the more powerful it becomes. And so I had Michael Moore. He's in the Boxing Hall of Fame. He's a light heavyweight champion and heavyweight champion of the world. And he's from where I'm from, and I trained him for years. And one of my good friends, he told me this, and it made no sense to me. I'm like, whatever, bud. I thought it was just a thing he thought. But athletes are really interesting because they don't understand why. They just know. They're so in tune with their body. They just know. And then that's how I learn a lot. Like I'm from athletes. I'm like, hey, what are you experiencing right now? And then they'll explain to me. I'm like, I wonder if it's this, this, and this. And then we can figure it out. It's pretty cool. But anyway, Michael Moore, he told me he can take one breath and bring his heart rate back down the baseline. So like he could be at like 160 beats per minute and then drop down to 100 in one breath. And I'm like, get the heck out of here. And we were in a fight in Puerto Rico, and there was no air conditioning in this place, and they did everything to make it very uncomfortable for us the whole time. It wasn't very safe. And it was so hot, and it was like the 8th round, and this was a tough fight. And his heart rate was he was really tired. It was just so much heat. And he was fatiguing. And he came back to the corner, and I put the stool in. He put his hands on the turnbuckle, looked up, took one breath, and it brought him back like that. But he didn't do it in any other rounds. It was the first time he did it in the fight. And then he dominated the rest of the fight. Like he kept doing that every time he come back, and he even did it within the round a couple of times. He just stepped back, he knocked the guy down, and then there was an 8 count, so he came back and he did that. And I was like, wow. And so after the fight, we got back to training, I actually had him wear a heart rate monitor, and we would measure it. And he trained himself to do this. And that was one of the big moments where I was like, wow, like books don't have everything in it. So you need to you need to read research. But if you only read research, you're limited, because it's like, okay, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. It's kind of that concept. So you can be too logical and be limited. So we have the left side of the brain, which is intellect, right? And then you have the right side of the brain, which is creativity, emotion, innovation. And so we need that balancing, that whole brain state, to really be super effective and have access to our resources, skills, and capabilities. I hope you enjoyed this CoachCast, my friends. We touched on the 3 pillars of power. We talked about what is chronic inflammation and what is the good inflammation. We talked about spot reduction and how it's a big waste of time, and a lot of times it creates injuries. By doing more isn't the answer. It's about working intelligently and consistently and being clear in what we want. And then we talked about using your victory bank to call forth different parts of you, different archetypes, so that you can get the job done. You can create life on your terms and have fun doing it. There's no reason to, life can be fun, it can be easy, it can be difficult, it can suck, but ultimately we are the creators of our circumstance. And it may not always be our fault, but it is our responsibility to deal with it. Just remember, you were made for this. You were born a lion, not a lamb. Until next time. You tap into the real you, but you have to retrain yourself. The way you retrain yourself is you wake your ass up in the morning and you say, I am here for a reason and a purpose. And it's bigger than my moods. It's bigger than the difficulties of the day. I am here to live like a lion, not the fear of a lamb.